Well, hello. I wanted to put this one up today. I thought about titling it Target Blindness, but that sounds wrong. I think we're gonna title this video Bullseye Blind. I want to talk about how, as hunters, we need to train to be bullseye blind. And what I mean by that is when you go out and you're going to sight in your rifle or your handgun, most people do it on a target of some sort that has a round bullseye or a rectangle with a crosshair in it or an inverted T or some type of aiming point that allows you to adjust and hold for your elevation as well as your windage, and it gives you a precise aiming point. I have never killed a white-tailed deer that had a bullseye painted on its side, or a squirrel or a rabbit or anything else for that matter. You're shooting at an animal that's covered in hair, that has some defined aiming points like a crease of a shoulder, but once we get our weapon dialed in, I think, and I may be wrong, you can disagree with me if you want to, but to be truly proficient, no matter our quarry, our intended target, we need to become bullseye blind. We can use painted or printed targets with a refined aiming point on them for zeroing. But when it gets closer to time to hit the woods, bird hunters don't shoot at duck targets or pheasant targets or turkey targets with bullseyes on them. Turkey hunters are aiming for the head and neck region. Waterfowl hunters and upland hunters it's ingrained in your mind to lead the bird to put them flying into your pattern. Rabbit hunters, you aim ahead of the running rabbit. So me and a friend of mine were having a conversation at work the other day, and it just kind of clicked in my head while we were talking. Bow hunters, what became real popular with bow hunters was 3D targets. Tournament archers shoot bullseyes, but bow hunters, 99.5% of bow hunters shoot 3D deer targets, javelina targets, boar targets, antelope targets, elk targets, bear targets, you name it. There's companies out there that make targets for archers, archery hunters, that realistically mimic what they're after. I haven't seen very many Mackenzies with visible bullseyes on them. They have scoring rings or vitals outlined in the foam. But as far as putting a big red dot on their side, you train your mind to shoot for the vital area, and it's not indelibly marked with a blaze orange marking on it, or with a red and yellow and blue green, multiple colored circles on it. So if you've ever shot your hunting bow at a 3D target, you realize that it's different than shooting at a bullseye target because it's more realistic. That being the case, I told this friend of mine, this coworker, that to get ready for pistol season this year, what I was going to do was just take a piece of cardboard and cut out the rough outline of a whitetail. Sorry, my prop blew over. Cut out the rough outline of a whitetail. Doesn't have to be perfect, just a rough outline, like this. We've got a neck, a foreleg, and a torso, and a ham there. And if we practice on this as handgun hunters, we have to take more care in aiming for those vitals, keeping it in behind the shoulder, low in the rib cage, the double lung and heart area, and we don't have a refined aiming point. You know, there's not a bullseye painted in there. We just have to get used to holding in the right spot. Your angle, we'll call it the angle of attack if you want to sound cool about it or whatever, but if you're hunting from a tree stand and you're 12 to 20 feet up the tree, if that deer comes in on a trail at 15 yards, the angle that's presented to the vitals is going to be a little different. You know, if you want to hit the top of one lung, graze the main arteries to the top of the heart and the bottom of the other lung, that angle is going to be a little bit different than if you were hunting from the same tree and it was 100 or 150 yards away. Now, hunting from the ground in a blind, it may not matter much whether they're 15 yards or 35 yards or 45 yards. You're still looking, then just bullet drop trajectory is what comes into play. But if we step away from the bullseye type targets, once our gun, our zero is verified, we know our trajectory, we know that our projectile's hitting to the point of aim. Come off the bullseye, put up a blank target, a deer outline. If you want to cut out a piece of cardboard that looks like a deer from the front with the width of the chest and two front legs, you know, if you want to do a broadside like the one I just showed, and you could even set it up quartering away or toward you or whatever. And likewise, everybody that goes out to sight in their firearm, if you're fortunate enough to have a flat range at home like we do, I've got mine mowed out. You know, it's probably 25 feet wide and 150 yards back to the farthest point from the backstop. And my target's always out in the open. When you're in the woods, your target is not always presented in a perfect shooting lane with zero obstructions. So if you've got a deer and it's standing behind some vegetation, some thin vegetation, and part of it's obscured, you need to be, which you should anyway, but be very familiar with the anatomy of said quarry. And know if you can see its hind end and you can see its head, but the part you're wanting to hit's behind a screen of leaves. And I'm not saying shoot at anything in the bushes. We all know how stupid people do this. You know, never been deer hunting and they see movement in the brush, so they blast it. And then, you know, Jim is gut shot. Nobody needs that. But if you know where that area is between the front edge of the shoulder that you can barely see and the hind end, you know, pick a leaf that you know is in front of the lungs and heart. It's not gonna be the end of the world. As long as it's thin cover, thin concealment in front of the animal, and your round and your bullet is capable of poking on through. You know, if I've got a screen of a lower limb of a sapling and it's 5 feet this side of the deer, I know that it's not going to make a difference clipping a twig, you know, with a 45 slug or a 12 gauge slug or a round ball. I mean, it's going to plow on through something thin like that. Don't be shooting at it when it's standing behind 5 acres of the same stuff. Just because you can see the head, that would be foolhardy. But bullseye blind, I'd like to hear y'all's opinions on it. It makes perfect sense with the bow hunters. That's why 3D targets are stuck up in every bow hunter's backyard just about, and people go to 3D ranges. But you don't really see the same thing with gun hunters. They zero their guns on bullseyes and they call it good. Well, yeah, I'm dead on. I can put 5 rounds under a quarter to 100 yards every time. Well, I don't hunt quarters. There may be a guy reply to this that calls himself 2-Bit Bob that does. I don't know. But not this cat. Let's think about it. Try it. See how it works out for you. You may be surprised in what your gun's actually doing in your hands with your eye when you're not pointing it, aiming it at a bullseye. If you're just aiming at the rough outline of the critter, you may be surprised at the results. So think about the anatomy. Think about the angle. don't think about a bullseye. You're going to have a bullseye on a deer, pick a hair. I had a shooting coach one time when I was shooting small bore in high school. We were shooting A-17 targets in competition. We shot them in practice and competition, but we were shooting them in competition one year, I think it was 1988, 89, that's telling, 87, 88, how old I am, but when we were down there on the firing line, he was going to each individual shooter, pacing the line behind us, and he squatted down and he said, "Thompson, that's not a bullseye you're aiming at, that's a squirrel's eyeball, and I am hungry. Bring it home." So, mindset, looking at your target, you know, it makes a difference sometimes. So, just thought I'd throw that idea out there. That's what I'm going to be shooting this year, cardboard cutouts. And we'll see if it makes a difference for me, and if you want to try it, so it makes a difference for you too. Maybe it will, maybe it won't, but it's just an idea I thought I'd share. All right, I'll see y'all next time. Bye.